Hello. It's good to be back again. And today we'll be doing something a bit different. We are delving into Windows, advanced Windows security space. And from this moment onward, we'll be recording content related to advanced Windows security and how to secure Windows, both from the whole concept of zero trust, taking advantage of that concept, then also from a tiered architectural perspective, I do know there are many conversations out there related to the tiering, and while some would say three tier is pretty much okay as long as we're not securing missiles. Microsoft would recommend like a seven tier architecture, which it's just crazy. But again, I think it's relative to your use case, more specific to your use case. If you know your current dwells as very important as you want to keep them secure, then you can actually top the notch. But I do think a three tier is just good enough for most enterprise environment, as long as you have the complete segregation or micro segmentation, which is just one of the pillars of the zero trust. You don't have a flat network kind of architecture whereby anybody on the network or on the VPN can actually see every resources that have read write. You've got the segmenting and the tiering, then you also have the micro segmentation done correctly in such a way that you can actually restrict access. And you have compensating controls in place to manage how access is actually abused or used. I think you should be good to go. Well, this is just my 2 cents. Who knows? It could be way better, anyways. Let's get into the whole meeting today's recording. I want to show how to actually leverage the entire concept to secure RDP. We do know that while some would argue RDP is actually a ransomware deployment protocol, as funny as that may sound, most ransomwares actually use RDP, and that's because of how innate it is. It's not, according to Microsoft documentation, it's actually not. It's supposed to be like a break glass solution, not actually the solution to remote managed systems. Because again, look at the context of RDP, you can only have like one or two, except you start increasing the license. But it's just good enough in case there is actually something. That's when you fall back. It shouldn't be your default method of managing systems, but just in case you still leverage it, you can have it secure using the whole concept of zero trust and also the whole concept of the tiering. And this recording, I'll be introducing the concept of PAR, what PAR is, privileged access workstation, as compared to jump hosts. Then see how we can actually leverage the PAR and also to correctly configure RDP using IPSec, then restricting who can actually RDP to crown jewels like our domain controller servers, using the concept of IPSec as well, getting those rules created and enforcing them using GPU. Okay, a quick content. We would look at PAW, we'll look at jump host, jump box, which kind of like similar. IPsec. I'm not going to be going into details of any of these again because to keep the recording succinct, I just would touch on a brief conversation around them. Then I move on. Then also we'll start deploying the GPUs. Then we will confirm IPsec connection using Wireshark to see the packets and be ensure that we have the authentication header set. Okay, so now let's switch into the first. We'll start by talking about PAW. What is PAW? Like I mentioned, privileged access workstation. In that context, beyond the definition, what does it really mean? Let's just talk a bit about that. Okay, so PAW, Privileged Access Workstation, is actually that physical workstation with the maximum security and hardening as you can actually imagine, because again, that workstation grants access to connect to your crown jewels. So it should only be used for the management of critical servers like your domain controllers or maybe your certificate servers, or maybe some people would put SCM in that space as well. And daily activities as email, internet browsing, and other stuffs must completely be stripped of that system. Again, I will showcase what it looks like in my context. I can actually just do that briefly. You would see that this is my power kind of systems. I have access to critical systems like but again, just for the recording purpose, you would see Kali Linux, you see some other servers, you see the domain controllers, and also you would see the clients. This would more or less be what we call a jump box. rather than a POR. Okay, but a POR, like I explained, it has to have the maximum security and hardening. Now, I know some would argue what of the in the context of the principle, there is actually a unique principle which most people don't know out there. It's clean source principle. Clean source principle simply explains that beyond just securing the having that highly secure environment, maximum security and hardening systems, which could be a virtual environment. A clean source states that the physical host must be as secure as that virtual environment. If not, it doesn't really make any difference. So whilst Paul, John Box, these are pretty much good concept. Don't forget that you have to comply to that principle of clean source, because if you don't have that in place, then it's not as secure as you would tend or define it to be. Okay, that's your paw. Now, how about a jump box or jump host, as some will call it? A jump box or jump host is actually similar. I wouldn't say the same as a paw. It's similar, but however, it's usually a server shared amongst systems administrators. So you have a group of sysadmin actually sharing that server, whereas a paw is actually a dedicated physical system. So this is handed to you because of the kinds of critical systems that you manage. So whenever you want to get connections to those critical environments, you only do that via the system. You can browse Facebook, you can check your emails, you can do nothing on that system. It's completely stripped. And I can actually show you what that looks like. If you see in here, there's practically nothing, like nothing except for just the cmd.exe, again for admin management. So you want to strip it off completely. Now a jump box can be shared, but a paw, it's specific and unique to me as a user, because again I need that. And now when you also look at that in retrospect to roles, jump box, usually if it's shared, again there is risk inherent in that sharing, because we would have multiple credentials, people connecting to it, and the fact that that is there, if an attacker compromises one of the admins, definitely can use that to actually compromise entire environment. So whilst jump box will be good, security by obscurity in the context, Paul will be better or even better if you know you have those admins who need to manage critical systems and you want to grant them access that is restricted and limited to their use only. That's where you find the Paul coming in. Again, however, Paul is actually not necessarily the favored solution, because we do know that IT is just what it is. You'd have sharing. No matter how we preach passwordless, there's still passwords. Even beyond passwords, you have very weak passwords, and I've seen such in enterprise environments as well. So, if you want to start thinking practically and having this concept of zero trust, I would recommend PAW. Again, those your critical admin should have PAW access to those critical systems or high integrity systems that you've defined. Okay, moving away from that, let's talk a bit more about IPSec. Now, I'm not going to delve too deep into IPSec because, again, it's a whole lot. It's actually a whole kind of worm, and I'm not ready to open that kind of worm, but I'm just going to do a brief talk about it. So, Internet Protocol Security, IPSec, it's actually a secure network protocol implemented in as it's actually as an add-on to the IPv4. Again, we have the IPv4, IPv6. We want to protect communication in IPv4 environment. IPsec, just the concept, adding the extra layer of security to the IP, which you already know. It provides both data confidentiality or data confidentiality, yeah, data integrity, and data authentication between the pairs that are communicating within that IP layered network. Now, it prevents attacks like impersonation, data tampering, eavesdropping, sorry, replay attacks. Most part of replay attacks can actually be streamed, kind of just by implementing IPsec. IPSec is also integrated into Windows Defender Firewall. So we're using Windows infrastructure environment. So we would see how we can actually take advantage of IPSec integrated into Windows Defender Advanced, whatever, to set up IPSec and use that to actually enforce certain rules that we would use to restrict access to our domain controllers. Now, IPsec protocols, usually you would hear the authentication header. You also hear the encapsulating security payload, which is the ESP. Whilst authentication header is actually provides authentication and integrity of the packets, we would see the ESP in context provide the confidentiality part, the integrity part, and the anti-replay part. There are several other options within the authentication framework as well that can provide. But I think these two modes is best if you want way better. I think I would recommend having both of them. But again, you can have one and the other. Again, it's up to you. But a better option would be to have both of them actually implemented, so you can get the full-fledged package that comes with implementing IPSec. Now, we've talked about IPSec. Now, the concept of Internet Key Exchange, IKE, I'm sure some of you would have heard or seen that, or ISAKMP, would be leveraging those. I'm not going to go into the main detail about the IKE phase, which we know is actually the main mode or aggressive mode, then also the quick mode. In this context of recording, we'll just go in and take the IPsec concept, leverage that, configure our GPO, and see how that can help us protect our infrastructure and our Windows infrastructure environment. So we will start with creating GPOs. For creating GPOs, IPsec operation mode, which would share the concept of like a transport mode, comes in the picture here. We can also see the concept of the IPsec algorithm, which is the ESP, which talked about earlier. RDP IPsec can actually be applied both on the jump box environment or power environment. You can use this to restrict ingoing connections to that server and only allow specific connections from a specific environment, which is what we'll be doing today in today's recording. Once we're done, we'll have those rules created. Then we'll see how those rules can be enforced. Then we'll try to simulate the connection or test and see if we can actually bypass those rules or if those rules are actually doing what they are meant to do. Okay, enough with IPsec talk. We will now get into deploying the GPO and see how that works within our infrastructure environment. Okay, so we're going to connect to, we'll be setting up this on our domain controller DC2. So we're going to connect to our DC2, open up that RDP session. Then once we connected to that machine, we can start the configuration. I'll have to put in the credentials, then we'll get back at that. Okay, so this is DC2. We are currently in DC2. Now we're going to start the configuration. First, we need to open up GPO, group policy management control, and start creating the GPOs and also setting up the settings. So I'm just going to use I think it's gpmc.msc, my badge. Okay, let's start that bad boy. Great, there we go. Now, within the domain, we can see some GPOs already present in there. There is already IPsec RDP, which is actually the one we're going to be creating. Let's just do this for demo testing purpose. Then there's also ingoing RDP session, also for demo purpose. Now, this we'll be creating these two, but I will walk you through that process so you can see how that works. So once it's done, we can only allow connections. Now, if you look at these GPOs, these RDP sec, then also ingoing RDP connections, they were actually inherited from the DC1 because they were created on DC1. Now that policy was enforced global, and we can see that on DC2, it's specifying the policies that which will end up as the endpoint, but it's only showing who is allowed to connect. So example for DC2, security filtering, we can see the setting is in this GPU can only apply to the following groups, users and computers, specifically DC1, DC2, and the server 01, which I want to allow connections for. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this. Then I'm also going to delete this, so we can actually get them created again from start. So to do that, we click on the domain, we right click on the domain. If my mouse will allow me to do that. All right. We'll right click on the domain, then we can see create GPO in this domain. So I'm going to create a new GPO, and we're going to give the first one a name, RDP IPsec. Okay, this should be good enough. Now the source starter is set to none because there's nothing there. We okay on this. Oh, it's telling me it already existed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tweak it a bit. I'm just going to use a different name. We'll call this V1 because it's going to inherit it again from the DC2. All right, I'm going to click on that. Now we can see that GPO which we just attempted to create in there, but currently it's empty. So we would see it's just in the location, the domain. If we go into details, there's pretty much nothing much to look in the delegation. We're just going to see this prompt. Great. So we're going to now start making the changes to enforce the configuration we want to enforce within this GPO which we've just created. Now we have the option to edit this. If I click on that, it opens it up in a new prompt. Then I'm just going to stretch this a bit so it's visible. All right, so we see we have computer configuration where we have policies preference, then user configuration as well as policies preference. In this first context, we'll be making the changes within the computer configuration space. So on that computer configuration, we go into the policies because we want to create policies. We go into the Windows settings. Then on that Windows settings, I'm going to stretch this a bit so it's readable. Under Windows settings, we will see security settings. Under security settings, now you would see the ADF as they call it, Windows Advanced Firewall with Windows Defender Firewall with advanced security. Okay, that's crazy. Anyways, all right. So if I drop that down, currently we would see the Windows Defender Firewall with advanced security policy, and we can also see the LDAP actually pointing to whatever we have in our domain configuration. Now we'll see inbound rule, we'll see outbound rule, and we'll see connection security rules. We will be creating connection security rules. So we'll be creating connection security rules. So if I right click on this and create a new rule here, it's going to open a prompt. Now within this prompt, we can now get the rule created. So we're going to create the first rule, which we want to create here. Now to do that, we'll be using the custom templates. So we can actually build this based on what we want. Remember, we're dealing with RDP 3389 specifically for that port. We can do for UDP and TCP as well. So we'll click on next here. That's what calling me. Okay, click on next there, and then we see any IP. So at this point, you can start narrowing down to where you want to enforce these rules. If I want these rules to be enforced on any IP, I'm just going to leave this at any IP. But if I want this to be enforced on specific groups, I can actually create those here by actually specifying those IPs. But that would smell like a blacklist, which I usually don't recommend because you're just going to keep growing that list. It's never going to end. Why not just block for all, then allow for few? Where you want to allow specify that within the rules, which just makes it easier for you to manage. So if you need to allow for new more, you update the allow list rather than the prevent or the block list. Okay, so we're going to go to the next. On the next, shut up. Okay, on the next, we'll configure this. When do you want authentication to occur? Now we want authentication to occur upon request authentication for inbound and outbound connections. Now we could actually require this, but we might lock ourselves out. So we're just going to request for now. All right, we can do the do not authenticate, but again, the whole concept of us configuring this is we want to actually set restrictions. So we select the first option, we click next on that one. Now for the authentication, we have options. For this recording, I will be going with Kerberos V5 for computer. I'm not looking at users because I'm looking at computer specifically. I want to connect to through RDP to my domain controller, not users that are trying to connect. So I'll select computer V5. Then at this point is where we can now specify if there's any specificity. So I will do for TCP and UDP. I will select TCP first. I will go for specific ports. I will pass that port 3389, which is RDP. Then for the endpoint 2, I will leave it for all ports. So this is the first one. Now I'm going to apply this to domain private and public. Whatever the connection or wherever it's coming from, that should be enforced. So now we'll give it a name. In our name, it has to be reflective of what protocol, because remember this is created for TCP. So we're just going to give it the first name, RDP IPSec. Remember we'll call this V1. Then we'll put this in parentheses for TCP. So we know this is specifically for TCP. You can leave a description if you want. I do not want to leave one. All right. Okay, just me being crazy. So we'll finish this. Once that is done, we can see the first rule. Now I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to do the same, but for UDP this time around. So we'll just run through it quickly. So without wasting time, custom, we select for any IP. We request authentication for inbound. Then we use computer version 5 for Kerberos. Then we set this for UDP. So UDP, the first we'll put for specific ports 3389 as well. The other will leave it for all ports. Then we'll just give it a name to actually identify this RDP IPSec V1. Oh, my bad. Uh, RDP IPSec V1. So put this in brackets. We'll call this for UDP. All right, no description. If you want, you can. Okay, so we got the two sets of rules created yet within our connection security rule. Now, once we're done with this, we need to create another GPO for the ingoing RDP restrictions. So in that GPO is where we're going to block everything and only allow what we want to allow. So we're going to go ahead with the second GPO creation. Once we get in that space, again, at this point, at least you know how to get the GPO created. So I'm not going to waste time talking too much there. I'm just going to go in here. We can see our first GPO, select this, and I'll create another GPO. And this GPO will give it the name for the ingoing. Here we'll have a total of 5 rules. 3 of them will be blocking, 2 of them will only be allowing what we want to allow specifically. So let's get into that space and get this rolling. Okay, so for the second GPO, we'll call this ingoing, I think ingoing RDP. Restrictions. My spelling is good there. Okay, oh, already exists, so I'm just going to give this V1. Okay, so we can get past that block. Now we will have that GPU here, so we will just edit this GPU. So we'll have that open up in a new prompt. Then we can make the necessary configuration in there. So for this, it's going to be slightly different. What we'll be doing here will be slightly different from what we did in the first one. But I believe it's going, oh man, come on. I believe it's going to be clear enough by the time we're done. Okay, so we go into computers policies, just like we did in the first phase. We go into computer, again, just you can just follow through policies, Windows settings. Then under this Windows security, then we will see the Windows Defender Firewall Advanced. We select that, drop that down. We can then see the connection rules inbound and outbound created in there. So we're going to repeat the process which we did, so we can create the first 2 rules to block. But for this, we'll be creating inbound rules, not connection security rules. So on the inbound rule, we'll just get the prompt up for new rules. So you just follow suit. Again, we're predefining these for specifically RDP. So we'll look for RDP, remote desktop. Okay, not for WebSocket, just remote desktop. We'll get that selected. Then we would see the option for the predefined. So it's going to create these 3 rules. If you look at them, basically walking us through what it does. Again, we need to understand that unlike in a Linux environment where, or normal classic firewall where the order takes precedence, here in Windows, it's not really the case. So I can have the order, whatever. It's the logic behind the configuration that actually determines which is applied first. So don't think it's going to be like a classic firewall where the ones that stays on top actually get applied first before the ones below in terms of priority. So we'll see remote desktop user mode for UDP, user mode for TCP, both of them in, then also the shadow in. Now it's necessary we have all these 3 applied. We will see for the first 2, 3, 3, 8, 9, and any, again, because we know attackers can actually still open up RDP connections on other ports. So we want to be sure we have those covered as well. All right, so we select next. Now, in the context of we want to allow or want to prevent, in this context, inbound, we want to block everything. We don't want to allow anything. Once you click on finish, it's going to create these 3 rules in here. So these rules, if you go through them, you can actually select each of them, looking into them one after the other, but I'm not going to be doing that here with you at this point of the recording. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to create duplicates of these TCP and UDP rules. Then we'll reconfigure them to actually allow. Remember, these three are actually blocking, but we want the rules that will allow, and what we want to allow will be defined within those rules. So I'm just going to select both of them, copy them, and I'm going to paste that over here. Okay, great. Just saving me some stress. Now I'm going to modify both of them to reflect the allow, just so we are able to allow connections in. So first we start with the TCP in, which is the one we just duplicated, which is this one here. If I just double click on it, it opens up this. So we're changing from block to allow connections. Then we can customize the connection that we want to allow in. So within the customization, we want to require the connection to be authenticated. Now this is where we're bringing in our IPSec configuration correctly done. So now we will allow the computers to dynamically negotiate the encryption. We don't want to enforce encryption, or we just want the computer to negotiate that. Now, again, remember, we already have those block rules. Those rules are enforced globally. We're creating an allow rule. We want to be sure, this is why I did mention that it doesn't matter the order. What matters is the logic. We want to be sure that this rule overrides the block rule. So if we don't click on this, the block rule will still be implemented. But now we're changing that logic to say these rules were created must override whatever block rules we already have in place. So be sure that that option is actually selected. Then we will click on OK here. We go over to advanced. Now under advanced, we don't want to allow this globally, so we don't end up just locking ourselves out. Just in case, if no network connectivity, negotiating the credentials for connection might be a bit hassle. So we want to just apply this to the domain connections, not to anything else. Be sure that you actually have a backup plan in case you get kicked out. Again, you don't want to be locked out. So we will get that selected. Then we will go into the next or the final configuration. We'll go into remote computers. So this is where we can now add the computers that we want this rule to be applied on. Remember, we did say we don't want everybody to connect. So we've created those three rules to block. Now we want to allow specific people to connect. So we need to, not just people, sorry, in this context, computers. We need to now define those computers. In my context, I'll be leveraging the infrastructure I have and allow connections only from specific machines. Which for my case, I will be doing that for the server and the domain controller one. So we're going to add those machines here. We will add it's domain join, so it's easy. I can actually do the other query. So I'm just going to put srv01. Find this. I should be able to see that. Great. Then I can actually add this. Then I will add another one. Then I will do the DC01. Oh, my bad. DC01. Check names. Sometimes you might run into problems, and that problems might be because we did not have computer selected. You want to look out for that. If it's not selected, you have to select it, because if it's only doing that for data security principles and group, you won't find those machines. So you must select computer to actually get that working for you. So we will also add this. Now we've added both computers. So it means we're only allowing connections to this server via RDP specifically from those two machines. This is really critical in the whole concept of power and having the isolation done correctly. You want to be sure that only specific machines are allowed to RDP into that crown jewel of yours in our context, which is exactly this DC2 we're trying to protect here. So you can also add exceptions in case you want to do, but we're not doing any of those today. So we will apply this and we're okay on this. So you would see it's now changed to like an encrypted connection and only allowing specific kinds of connection through it. We'll do the same for the RDP, UDP, sorry. Just double click on that. Then we'll just do the same settings, allow connection, customize this. We'll allow connections encrypted. We allow that. Then we'll override the block rule. Okay on this. Again, just follow the same workflow which we did at first. So we'll go into advanced. We will deselect this. then we go into remote computers, then we're going to add those computers as well as exceptions which won't allow. So we have SRV01, find that name. Then we also have DC01. I could just search both of them within the same and just add it, but that's just me being lazy here. Okay, great. Now we have that done. We're also going to apply this rule. And okay, now you see we've got all three of them there. Remember, this is not going to be enforced unless we actually apply an update. So what we're going to do is we've created GPUs. We must link our GPUs to the domain. Then we must apply our GPU by actually running the GPU update so that can actually enforce that change which we've done. That's what we're going to be doing next. So let's get into that space. Okay, so for the final phase, now we go back to our GPU. We can see the GPU, the domain. We can also see those two GPUs we've created. We still have one more thing to do before the final phase. So we click on, let's say we click on the first one, for instance. Under the scope, we will see this is actually filtering for all authenticated users. We don't want this. So again, remember, this is actually for computers. So we're going to remove this. Okay, it's fine. We know all that. Then we're going to add those computers specifically. Be sure that the objects you have computer selected or toggled on. We search for the object, which in our context is SRV01 to start with. We have that present. Then also we want to do the same for DC01. Now we're going to do this for both GPUs which we've created so that both of them can actually take cognizance of the fact that we're enforcing this or filtering for these computers or these machines. We're okay on this as well. We have that done here. Under the delegation, we don't really need to do anything there. I'm not going to touch on that now. Maybe in subsequent recording, I can actually touch on that. So once we're done with this, we go to the second. We also apply the same settings. We remove this. Okay, I know. Thank you. Then we add those objects. So we're going to do SRV01. We are definitely sure we have that turned on computer. If not, we won't find that. Just I think I'll show you in the second one why that's necessary. DC01. If I search for this, it's not going to see it because I don't have that object type selected. So I have to select computer, then I have to check the name, then it's there. Great, so I've done this for both of them. Now I have actually applied, I've enforced those changes to these filterings, these machines. So once this is done, we can go to the delegation tab and do a few changes. So I'll go to the first one, okay on this, go to the delegation. So under the delegation, we would see authenticated users. It's no more here. So be sure that we don't want that in there, but just in case, we can actually add them here and grant only like a read. We can just grant like only a read, like a read permission. So if I okay on this, you would see read only. I don't want anything else beyond read. Everybody else authenticated user can actually just read this. Okay on this. Be sure I do the same thing under the second one as well. I'm going to add authenticated users. Check this name, then okay on this, then add the read only. I'm fine with that. Now once we have this done, we need to link the GPUs to the domain. That's the final phase. So if I go here and I click on this domain, I would see the option to link an existing GPU, and I want to select those GPUs which I've just created. So we call them V1, which is this one, and this one. So we want to be sure that we're able to link both of them to the domain. I can just use my control command to select both of them and okay on that. Again, if you have multiple domains, you have to do that right. You need to be sure you are selecting the right domain. I'm just going to show that again. If I link this, you have the option to select the domain specifically that you want to do that for. So once you select that, you select the first one. I'm using my control command, select the second one, then I OK on that. So it's going to link both GPUs to the domain. At this phase, all I need to do is run the GPU update. I don't think I need to restart the server, but just in case you do that and it doesn't enforce it, because once I run GPU update, it's going to domain-wide propagate this change and enforce this or apply this change. So, but just in case you don't get that done, probably will need to restart the server to have that done correctly. Okay, I'm going to be wrapping up this video here. I just need to open a command prompt, then I'm just going to run the GP updates, and that should be good. Okay, so it's going to enforce the change or whatever changes we've made domain wide. Then once that is done, we should be good to go. Now, to verify this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up one of these guys here, maybe this one probably, and I'll try to RDP from this guy over to that DC machine, the domain controller to machine. Let's see if that's gonna actually allow us. Again, if this hasn't really been replicated completely, we'll still be able to connect, but let's just give it a shot. I can't remember my password. What in the world is wrong with you? Okay, so we will log in here. We'll start up RDP. My bad. There's a few things going on here. So we'll look for RDP. It takes a while to load correctly, anyways. Man, it's frozen. Okay, I'm just gonna pause the recording until that is. Okay, so to wrap this up, I'm not sure I'll complete the final phase of this. We'll try to connect from a desktop to that computer and see what that looks like. So we'll click on the connect button. It's going to attempt to want to connect through our RDP. Again, on that domain controller, if I have Wireshark running, I definitely will be able to capture packets, but I'm not going to show that part because to get back to work, and it's almost 36 minutes recording. So you're going to have something like this telling you it's either this or something is wrong. You're not able to connect via RDP to that machine. Again, we've locked down that machine. We don't allow RDP connection except for specific machines. Now I could try that connection from like the server 01. I will be able to negotiate and connect via RDP. Just so you know, I would love for you to test this on environment. Again, before you get this on a prod environment, be sure you have done proper testing on a dev or low environment, and you're good to go. So thanks for your patience, and thanks for sticking around or hanging out with me. I hope you had some fun, and I hope I'm able to show you a few things that are of maybe importance to you. This is why I end the recording. I'll be seeing you in the next one. Now, we'll be building on this to actually get recordings done for Windows infrastructure environment. I hope you do love the content. If you do, like and subscribe, share with your friends, and see you in the next recording. Thank you and bye.